morning, and welcome to Coffee and Conversations with Mr. William Lietzau, Director, Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. Please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson Heckenberg.
Good morning. It's great to see so many folks registered for this morning's Coffee and Conversation program. But before we dive in, I just wanted to share a couple of housekeeping notes. If you all have questions, and we know you will, many of you have already submitted them online, please submit them now through the questions box on the right side of your screen. I always particularly enjoy when folks include their name and organization, but it's not required. We do have over 600 registrants for today's program, so I will do my best to get to everybody's questions. 45 minutes certainly does fly by. We are also pleased to welcome members of the press to today's webinar. This is a reminder that the program is on the record and being recorded and will be available for reviewing by the end of the week. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Valerie Fontaine, Director of Pre-Sales for SIMS Software, who will introduce our speaker today. Valerie, I'll turn the camera over to you.
Thank you to the INSA organization for the opportunity for SIMS Software to sponsor this event. I'm pleased to be able to introduce today's speaker, Mr. William Lietzau, the Director of the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. DCSA celebrates their 50th anniversary of being the premier security and counterintelligence agency in the US government. SIMS Software is excited to celebrate our 40th anniversary with an unmatched suite of security compliance tools for industry and government. From small cleared companies to the largest corporations and agencies in the defense and intelligence community, SIMS has the right application for your security compliance mission. Director Lietzau assumed the role of Director of DCSA on March 30th, 2020. Mr. Lietzau leads both the personnel vetting and critical technology protection missions under DCSA and manages approximately 12,000 federal and contract support personnel worldwide. Additionally, Mr. Lietzau directs the development of an end-to-end national level information technology infrastructure designed to support the personnel vetting enterprise. DCSA is a strategic asset to the nation and allies, leveraging advanced technologies and innovation, an extensive security education and certification enterprise, and a substantial counterintelligence capability set to continuously ensure a trusted federal workforce and enable in industry's delivery of uncompromised capabilities to preserve America's strategic edge. Prior to Mr. Lietzau's current role, he served as the director of the Personnel Vetting Transformation Office, where he managed the transfer of the National Background Investigations Bureau to the nascent DCSA. Mr. Lietzau also served in private industry as a vice president of a large government services contractor and is a retired U.S. Marine colonel, as well as a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and Yale Law School. So please join me in welcoming Director William Lietzau.
Thanks, Valerie. I'm not supposed to be saying anything now, am I, Suzanne?
You are welcome to say something, but first of all, I too wanted to thank Valerie and SIMS Software, and then also just remark that I was looking back, and the last time we had you speak at a public forum online like this was January 21st, 2021. And I think we've come a long way on so many different levels since then, but would love to just sort of get an overview from you about where the organization is, how it has evolved. You have brought in so many different entities and cultures and systems to DCSA, and just sort of get a report card from you about how things are going.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. I'd be happy to do that. Until you just reminded me, so that's what, 2 years ago, I guess. I was still in the first year as director here, and it was during COVID. And ironically, I don't remember, was I on camera then or just on telephone? I don't know.
You were on camera because I've watched bits and pieces of it over the weekend. So I got the full webinar. So
it's scary that I don't have a recollection of it either. The other problem is, because I'm looking at myself now, and you've made me look skinnier, or you haven't done it, we've done it, which shows you a little bit of evolution that's taking place. We have a skip situation here where we have multiple ways of getting to an unclassified video capability. This is not the preferred one, but apparently they were having me walk a shorter distance.
I don't think we'll get it. So.
Nobody's going to complain about my skinniness. That's one development, is we have multiple, we've gotten very good at COVID, and we have multiple ways of having these kinds of sessions even within a skip. That's kind of a smaller change, though. I'd say what has happened in the last couple of years, though, is a substantial maturation of the agency. We're no longer the new agency that's coming together to handle our mission sets. Upon becoming director, I broke it down into all the different missions, which we kind of counted as 8 distinct missions. Then we've kind of reconfigured the agency into 4 major mission areas, the 2 that are raison d'etre, personnel security and industrial security, and then the cross-cutting functions of counterintelligence and insider threat and security training. And they cut across both of those pillars. What we've also done is we have our first strategy in place. We have strategic goals specific to each of these mission areas, and we have strategic goals specific to all the functional support areas within the agency. So it's been a constant improvement. I'd say in those 2 years, you could see mission improvement, measurable mission improvement in every single one of the mission areas, and measurable functional improvement across the board. The other thing we've done more recently is combine our regions, change the regional structure, put senior executives out in the field as regional directors that have a combined focus on the various mission sets. In this case, I break it down slightly differently. Industrial security representatives, certifying companies, entities, IT systems that we certify, classified IT systems, background investigations, and counterintelligence, all out in the field. So that combination has taken place as well. And then we've got the regular thing every organization does that merges is kind of achieving a common culture, which I think everyone would agree is in a pretty good place right now.
Absolutely. And I remember being out there, maybe not even quite a year ago, meeting with you and some other folks at DCSA, and you were talking about these different regions and the regional directors. How many regions are there?
4 regions. We have a eastern region, a mid-Atlantic, a central region, and a western region. And you can kind of imagine where those lines would be.
Okay. And we had quite a few questions come in advance of this morning's webinar, and I see some others populating on my screen here, but there were several related to Trusted Workforce 2.0 and the implementation and kind of where you all are, what some of the principal challenges are, and then lastly, how industry can help.
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. And there's there in all those mission areas, as we're kind of, that's in fact, somebody, I think Valerie, when she introduced me, said my last job had been personnel vetting transformation office. Sounds like I'm an expert in personnel vetting. No, it was a bringing together of organizations that brought me to that job. But the very fact that it was named that tells you where the US government's focus was when they created the agency. Personnel vetting, the personnel security component of our mission is where the world was focused after the data breach and the Snowden and Navy Yard shooter and all of that. And there, the concept work for improving the way we do personnel vetting was already done by it's a good news story. The Interagency had done that work. We're the implementers, and we're in a significant implementation mode right now. But there's a fair amount of complexity to it, but it's been a pretty good news story, I think, any way you look at it. So in some ways, your first one becomes a softball question, at least in the initial stages. The first part of Trusted Workforce 2.0 was improve timeliness, bring down the backlog of cases. That was kind of phase 1. That was already underway as we formed, and it continued without a hitch. So that, you know, if I go back 4 or 5 years, at its height, I want to say a top secret, just the investigation alone was about 403 days, I think was our peak. Somewhere in the 380s was the average for the year. Now we're down sub 90 regularly. So it's about an 80% reduction in the investigation. When you look at the quality, the second phase of Trusted Workforce 2.0 is moving into, the essence can be captured in continuous vetting, where instead of waiting 5 or 10 years to reinvestigate, you're vetting continuously. We have the initial capabilities in that world up and running for 4 million people who have security clearances, and there's no question we have a more trustworthy workforce today because of it. So the softball nature of it is faster and higher quality. If you look at, you know, project management, you hear cost, schedule, performance, and you're weighing those, and you know, price goes up if you want to go faster, price goes up if you want higher quality. We are enjoying a situation where not only we clearly have better quality, we're clearly faster, and I just signed off on the 3rd price reduction in 3 years, another 18%. So we're up in the neighborhood of 25% without inflation, where we've reduced the cost to the taxpayer and saved, you know, well over $100 million to give a better product faster. So implementation, we're in good shape. When you get to the challenges, that's this phase 2, as we take continuous vetting and move it all into an NVIS environment where the one IT system, a modern IT system, not the one built in 1984 that we're replacing, but the one that is an end-to-end system. As we start bringing components into that while building it, that's the most challenging part that we're working on right now.
So a couple of things I wanted to highlight. You know, you were talking about the reduced times for clearances. We've got a lot of folks. Actually, I counted over 35 students on this morning's webinar, both undergrad and grad, Georgia Tech, American University, Georgetown, GW, Walden University, Cornell, colleges all over the country tuning in to hear from you today. But a lot of these folks are interested in jobs in the intelligence community. And so the stats that you shared with us will only benefit them as they look to get cleared. But there were 2 things I wanted to pull the thread on. And one was continuous vetting. And so for those that are already in the community and already have a clearance, whether it's TS, Secret, TSSCI, how does the continuous vetting model help reduce security risk for them as part of their privacy, civil liberties? You know, how can they be assured that their personal information and everything and security is protected with continuous vetting?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. It's a great question. I don't think when you look at the privacy situation, which we take very seriously, I have, you know, on our private, because we own so much data with the workforce of the United States, that data breach that kind of led to the Congress saying DOD build NVIS, that data breach is something that's constantly in the back of our heads. I think that's where the privacy concern should lie, is that we're able to protect that data from another situation similar to what we saw in 2015 timeframe. I don't think continuous vetting really increases that concern too much. Now, there are checks that everyone who has a clearance today has authorized in the forms you filled out with your SF-86, all the checks that we're doing, you know, 7 categories, very similar to what you got in an initial investigation. You know, terrorism databases, foreign travel, suspicious financial records. We look at credit reports, criminal activity, various other public records. Nothing unusual that should give someone concern with respect to their privacy. The benefit that we get from that is that we're finding concerning behaviors or activities or indicia of reliability much sooner than if we were doing it every 5-year or every 10-year investigation. By way of example, we've done some some number crunching, and we're finding things for a top secret about 2 years before we would normally find it, for a secret about 7 years before. Last year alone, we referred over 2,000 cases to law enforcement or to some insider threat hub beyond just suspending eligibility for clearance. So we found like things that needed to be criminally prosecuted because of continuous vetting. So it's a good news story for the government.
That's very encouraging. So I wanted to go back to something you said earlier and about the timetable and the cost reduction related to clearances. And I believe around 90% of clearances are taken care of by DCSA. Is that a rough number versus other agencies?
I think that's a good estimate.
Okay, somebody can fact check me, but that's kind of what my notes say anyway. So question, how can, that other 10%, the other IC agencies that conduct their own background investigations match DCSA's timetable, and what is your challenge to them?
Oh, that's a volatile question. They're all doing wonderfully, and I don't track their timeliness. Obviously there are certain agencies that want to emphasize certain components of an investigation. Our goal, when you look at what services we provide, we can provide a data platform for repository for cases that will. And eventually NBIS would serve as that, and we would encourage every agency to use that. Then we can do a background investigation. We have about 140 government customers that use us. We could also do adjudications, and we can do continuous vetting on behalf of any agency. So one is they could use us. Our goal there is we're not asking for business, but we're kind of build it and they will come. If we're better, faster, and cheaper, then eventually they'll use us. But what we also can do is we do components of that entire spectrum. If another agency wants help with it, that doesn't mean that they're all benefited by us. We have economies of scale that help us. We have done a lot of process improvement, and I've got an incredibly dedicated workforce, by the way, that people should not, I've worked in a lot of different spaces in government and outside of government. And, I loved being around Marines when I was in the Marine Corps, but I love being around DCSA employees. There's no glamour in this job. People took the job because they're public servants, and they just do things well. But that said, there are ways to even improve on the speed that we have. In some cases, because we're doing data polls for large numbers, I ingest about 10,000 cases a day of some sort. That's a high number. If we wanted to, some places we're waiting for data from another source, whereas if we pick up a phone and call them directly, we can actually get it faster. So some of the intelligence community members, if they want to do something quickly, may be able to do it faster by picking up a phone and making calls. It works out that we tend to be pretty fast. But the point is, there are ways to even improve it. Can't do that for 10,000 cases a day, obviously.
Right. Obviously. So you mentioned something near and dear to my heart, and I know a lot of folks who have clearances, but the SF-86. And so I wanted to find out a little bit more about the personal vetting questionnaire, the PVQ, and how that process of investigating and clearing applicants will be more effective and efficient with the PVQ, and what that timeline is to make that transition, if that has even been established yet, which it may not have.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's and I'm going to caveat my answer with the fact that I'm not really sure, because here again we've postured ourselves as we're the implementer. The DNI and the OPM director as the suitability executive agent and the security executive agent kind of give guidance. We get more guidance from DOD because we're a DOD agency, and we implement. Now, we're also part of the Performance Accountability Council that's kind of working through these issues. And I think we're looking at they've done a lot of work. This is a good government in action example across the security enterprise. Not just DCSA and our employees, And the various core federal personnel vetting core doctrine has come out. Investigative standards have come out. We're working on adjudicative training standards, investigative training standards. There are a lot of new trusted workforce policies and procedures being put out. One of them is going to be what you just referred to, that'll replace the SF-86. It's probably a year or two out before we see it. It'll be looking at better questions, the kinds of and then we're building through NBIS what we call EAP, which is a replacement for the older EQUIP, which is a replacement for paper. And so as we're advancing, EAP is being built in such a way that we're going to be able to modulate and change it rapidly to be able to accommodate the new SBQ. But in terms of the details and how much better it'll be, I'd have to say we're kind of in a wait mode as we work through these policy issues with the whole government.
Well, I'm sure we have many viewers today that would love to weigh in on some of the questions that are asked of the SF-86, particularly some of the questions that were created before we had the internet and social media. And so that they certainly could be a little more better reflective of the current times, but it still gets the job done. And that's the important thing. So one question I wanted to have is, as we talked about your workforce and how inspired you are about their ethic and how committed they are to the mission. You also run one of the government's only polygrapher training schools. And so I wanted to know what some of the challenges are with recruiting folks to be part of the training schools, and if these polygraph exams that these polygraphers conduct, are they happening fast enough to fill some of the vacancies? And just so everybody knows, students and others, not everybody has to have a polygraph depending on what kind of clearance you're getting. So you don't have to be totally fearful of that, but it is a big part of the cleared workforce and one of the hurdles or opportunities that they have when getting their clearance.
No, that's also a great and timely question, because sometimes, I just gave this good news story of how we've reduced timelines and things like that. And then everyone's got an anecdotal experience where it didn't fit. And in fact, the timelines I gave you are the fastest 90% of clearances. So even in our world, the complicated case that involves a bunch of, whatever the complicating factors are that require more investigating, those cases take longer. And often when somebody has their anecdotal example, they're not really talking about the initial clearance. They're talking about the subsequent polygraph. It's what's going to allow them to have access in whatever the intelligence agency is that they might be working. It doesn't have to be an intelligence agency. The polygraph school, I believe it's the only government polygraph school, is providing polygraph examiners for 33, 34, somewhere in the low 30s, government agencies that use polygraph examiners in some way or another. And we run a school that somewhere in the 90s, I don't have the exact number, but we graduate probably about 90 polygraph examiners a year. And that appeared, we've been told by customer agencies that use those polygraph examiners that they need more. That said, we have the capacity to put more in the class. We always do have empty school seats, and I have the ability to surge and in fact increase our output of polygraph examiners if we need to. We're preparing to do that because we have heard that there's a paucity of polygraph examiners in some places. But again, we don't have a good gauge of that because it's those agencies that are using the polygraph examiners that give us the demand signal for more.
Okay, well, it sounds like there might be some hiring potential out there for those folks who are watching. So
It's a solvable problem. And I should just mention too, because the Undersecretary for Intelligence and Security here at DoD is keenly focused on ways to improve the polygraph exam or the types of things that a polygraph exam elicits in terms of deception. And we also have a program where we're looking at new technologies and pilot cases for how we could do that better than the original polygraph machines that you're all familiar with from TV shows.
Yes, from a lot of it's
not in person.
So I'm going to dive into a few audience questions. I've got a question here from Karen Wagner. Good morning, Karen. When you were at DHS, you were the first leadership dinner speaker I ever had the pleasure of hearing from. So it's good to have you here. Your question is, have we made progress in using big data analytics on publicly available data in support of personnel security and CI?
Yeah, great question. We are, when you say using big data analytics, there you can look at that two different ways. We clearly have big data pools that we've learned how to scrape certain things that we're looking for. In terms of the big, we've done a little bit of both. They're both in the testing and piloting phases right now. When I say both, I mean the ability to scrape from large data pools of information that were previously unavailable to us, and then the ability to use big data analytics to identify indicia of usefulness of what we're scraping for. Both of them are in the works. We have pilot programs working on both. I can't say, for instance, we have ways of using big data analytics to look at all the adjudications we did over a period of time and which ones came out a certain way and what were the things that we might be able to identify as a good indicator that this one deserves more scrutiny than others in ways we wouldn't have known before. We've got test programs that have looked at that and test programs that have that a lot of corporations have offered too. We've been testing different products out there to see their ability to pull data that might be useful. We're working through all of that right now. I can't say that we've arrived at specific tools that we've decided are worth investing in and changing our policies in a way that we use them on a regular basis. We're still in the kind of investigation stage of how we can best use those tools.
So I have a question here from a viewer, Jetta Breslow, and she wants to know, how does DCSA work with agency acquisition officials to ensure that known counter intel threats, as well as industrial security vulnerabilities, are incorporated into RFPs and contracts? So this is a great question for all of you all acquisition folks out there.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a great question because it kind of leads to, when I talked in the very beginning, you asked how have we matured as an agency, or maybe I used the word matured. You said, how do we change? I'm using the word mature. It's a good thing. But whereas personnel security, we're really focused on implementation, where there's been a lot of thought work done on how do we get better at having a more trustworthy workforce. On the industrial security side of the house, we find that this is a complicated problem that cuts across many more government agencies and entities that are involved. The easy ones are State Department, for instance, is doing ITAR, and Commerce is doing EAR, and those are just known things that are security related. Whereas in the NIST is kind of largely owned by us with about the same numbers as you see for personnel security. That's true for facility clearances. But your question can go beyond the NISP, the National Industrial Security Program, which was classified programs. And in that regard, that's the new frontier that we've got to, it shouldn't be a new frontier. That's the frontier that we need to be focused on to really figure out how to handle it better. The problem you have is with the number of agents that we have here at DCSA and the size of the NISP, 10,000 companies, about 13,000 cleared facilities that are working with classified programs, and about 5,000 to 6,000 classified systems that are working on those classified programs. That more than covers all the resourcing that we have at DCSA to handle that classified work. Now you expand out where we're seeing through our counterintelligence capabilities massive attacks, if you will, into the larger defense industrial base. Now you're talking a much higher number of contracts and contractors. So there's a long-winded way to get to, I think we need to up our game in how we work with those contracting officials, because right now I just don't have the bandwidth. When some are familiar with a new provision that has us start looking at contracts over $5 million in the defense industrial base that may or may not be classified. Now, where we're currently dealing with about 400 contracts a year that are classified, now we're dealing with 40,000 contracts a year that are over $5 million and include non-classified ones. Right now, specifically engaging with individual contracting authorities over those 40,000 alone is a huge effort. So what we do, and I'm sorry for that long-winded response, that's all the things that we're not able to do as effectively as I would like as a kind of security professional. But the one thing we do is we take what data we do glean from the reports that we get from industry, and we look at how our adversaries are breaking into systems, what tactics they're using, and we put that out, and there's an unclassified version on our website. We call it the trends report. What are the trends in how our adversaries are trying to take advantage of our vulnerabilities? And we encourage all contracting authorities to look at that, and we give them regular briefings and education programs whenever we can. But we can't do it contract by contract like you ideally would like to.
Understood. So somewhat related to the trends report, I have a question here from Helen Nickerson in Boston, Massachusetts. She wants to know, could you speak to some of the foreign intelligence threats to critical U.S. technologies and infrastructure, and how the community can better understand our adversaries' innovation aspirations? I think that's a fairly timely question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Of course, here, this is where we do get into the very reason I'm squashed on this screen, at least the one I'm looking at, is because that some things that we deal with in the SCIP or in a classified setting, and then we have things that we can talk about in an unclassified setting. I think there's some clarity on the unclassified. We have a classified trends report as well. And we share that whenever we can with the cleared companies that are doing business with the U.S. government. I guess if you're a cleared company, you are doing business with the U.S. government. But again, the unclassified one you can reach on our website. It'll tell you things like, what we receive from industry in terms of incursions or attempted incursions, or things we observe with our own computer programs that look at how foreign entities are attempting to penetrate unclassified systems of our cleared contractors. We find we're getting about 35% of them from Asia and East Asia. We get about 23% or so, I think, from Near East. And so you see, that's where the big locations are. The techniques they use are using research assistants. They're attacking academia right now, putting scholars in place. Right now, for example, I want to say, recent figure I saw, we got about 317,000 Chinese students at the university or above level in the United States, often working in science, engineering, technology. You'll find, for instance, using that example, China has laws that not only require any Chinese company to share with government intelligence entities the technologies they develop and the information they glean. Obviously we don't have parity in the United States on things like that. So, and then there's obviously theft, stealing of technology, and what we find is easier is the stealing of the basic research and the academic research that's about to be operationalized. When that's stolen, it's much easier to do in an unclassified setting. So those are the kinds of things we're seeing. And then I think the technologies that they're going after are pretty obvious too. Electronics, software, aeronautics, command control, and C4 equipment and other armaments are kind of the top ones. Those are the unclassified portions of what we can share.
Okay, and you said that's on, some of that is on your website as far as the unclassified. So folks who want to dig in a little bit deeper to that. So we have about a little less than 10 minutes, and there are several things I want to touch on, and I've had multiple questions roll in related to supply chain, facility clearances, as well as recruitment at DCSA. So as far as the supply chain goes, to what degree has DCSA seen our adversaries attempt to penetrate the supply chains of government contractors?
We see it every day. I will say that, you know, in talking to my workforce, you heard me talk about the service orientation of this team. They don't carry weapons and they don't have movies made about them in the intelligence community. We're gatekeepers. Nobody makes movies about gatekeepers. You do your job well, you prevent something bad from happening that might be worthy of a movie, but it doesn't happen. That, you know, that team though, I would say when the United States is not in a shooting war, this is where the war is today. And we're observing it every day as we observe the incursions, we inform industry, or we take actions to prevent it on a regular basis. In some ways, this is the battle line. You know, the Sun Tzu, I'm going to paraphrase, at some point said the victorious warrior wins first and then goes to war. The defeated warrior goes to war and then tries to win. The winning first is with our industrial base. It's bringing our industrial base to a place where when that, if and when some kind of a conflict breaks out, the supply chain is so compromised that we're not able to use it the way we would like to. That's the battle space that DCS employees are engaged in every single day. They see it happening, and we're constantly taking actions to kind of close the vulnerabilities and to inform the larger team. Because again, gatekeeper has changed. It's not just one person putting up and down a gate. It's got to be the entire security enterprise looking at that.
So I promised a question on facility clearances. And so what is DCSA doing to reduce the timelines for a company to receive a facility clearance? This is from Mary Griggs.
Yeah, so Mary, that's a question that we don't have enough time to answer, but it is absolutely a focus. We're on the personnel security side, we're implementing, and we have an investment that has been made into IT systems to allow us to collect the data. We have metrics. I can give you numbers of days. I gave you numbers that weren't even about. They were sometimes precise. I don't have that capability right now on the industrial security side. When you say, how long does it take to get a clearance? When I got here as the agency director, I started asking that question and I started getting different answers. One of the reasons is our own IT systems that handle the industrial security side aren't as modern as they should be. We're working all of that right now. We're looking at all the process improvements. We're tiering the different types of facility clearances. We're better using our counterintelligence fenced off group that looks into that, and we're looking at IT tools outside of our own IT tool to manage it that will help us do it. So right now, I can't tell you what our goals are, but we're going to have several categories of FCLs. We're going to have specific goals, and we're going to try to achieve them the same way we did on the personnel security side. But it's kind of this year's effort, not last year's effort.
Understood. Well, that's encouraging. So I mentioned over 35 students are registered for today's program. And so I would be remiss if I didn't ask some questions about recruitment, retention, and the cleared workforce. But as far as some of the students, this is from a student at Auburn University, War Eagle. She asked, what is some advice you can give future employees of the cleared community about navigating the clearance process? Some like tangible advice. I know what I would tell my kids, but what would you tell yours?
I wish my kids would ask that question, but they don't. No, it's kind of the same advice I give people asking for career advice. Every once in a while you step back and you think, okay, what do I want to do? But since you're not really going to be able to figure it out now, I still haven't figured out what I'm going to do when I grow up. I've always, said, saw the wood in front of you. Get good at that. That's always going to pay dividends. And in a similar way, when you look at the clearance process, we're going to give you, or somebody's going to give you the form to fill out. You're simply going to fill it out. You're going to tell the truth, and it's going to be fine. What you do is, on the long term, like sawing the wood in front of you, you cultivate the attributes that will cause you to be both a good employee and someone who can get a clearance easily. The recent investigative standards, they came out with the 4 attributes of regard for rules, appropriately engaging with others, protecting property, information, people. Those things are good for all employees anywhere in the world. The 4th one, by the way, a little bit different, which is kind of conduct that's consistent with U.S. national interests. That's something that I would say, if you don't love this country, don't try to get jobs with clearances. But if you do, then that's one of the attributes you want to cultivate too. Work on those things, and then just answer the questions when the screen asks you questions for your and the polygraph examiner asks you questions. You just tell the truth, and taking time to think about how to prepare for any of those things, not worth your time.
Don't overthink it. Okay, so I'm going to have just a couple quick questions. Here is a question from Joe Mazafro that is somewhat related to that. He thanks you for your time this morning, and he wants to know what your view of the value of polygraphs is in vetting people for high-level security clearances. Tough question, Joe. Let's see how Bill's going to answer that.
Joe, I think we're getting to the end of the period of time that I can answer questions. I recognize that, let's put it this way. When the polygraph identifies something that would have been a problem, we know it worked. And the polygraph exams have clearly identified problems where we were able to spot somebody who would have not been a trustworthy member of the workforce, and they were spotted via polygraph. So in that regard, the capability is proven. I have not personally gotten involved in the policy debates about when and where you should or shouldn't use them. So I honestly don't have a strong opinion in that regard. Clearly, it has done some good in the past. Clearly, there are people who don't think it's worthwhile, and it's the bang for the buck isn't there. That's a debate that I won't get into. We will implement it, and we will make sure that the polygraph examiners that this government has are the best possible polygraph examiners you can get, and they'll be the ones most likely to elicit information that will identify vulnerabilities and weaknesses. That's about all I can promise, because I really have not personally done the research.
So along the lines of when we were talking about the transition to the personal vetting questionnaire, the PVQ, and this may be too early, I think, to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's something we should all really put a lot of thought into. But Jetta Breslow in DC wants to know if the proposed PVQ will address questions on mental health conditions and treatment, and how that might evolve in the PVQ versus the SF-86. I think it's very much needed given the past few years and kind of the mental health crisis I think that the country has been experiencing.
No, that's a great question. There's been already discussions about SF-86 changes even before the PVQ comes out, and clearly this mental health issue is one that is kind of at the forefront of concern areas in the United States today. What I can say is, there's not like this, it's not like I've got a book here somewhere that's got all the PVQ questions that are likely to be on there. We're not engaged at that in that way, or I personally am not. That said, there's clearly things that we'll do. It's going to look for concern areas with respect to keeping classified information or suitability for work. It's what is clear is getting mental health assistance will always be encouraged. The last thing we're going to do is put a set of questions in there that if you reveal that you're getting mental health assistance from a professional, that can somehow hurt you in your ability to clearance. That is what we're going to make sure doesn't happen. It already doesn't happen. That's not a area of concern, but it's an area where there's misinformation out there that can cause people to get concerned. Yeah, so there will be a lot of scrutiny put on the questions that are related to mental health to make sure that that we get the right answers that are talking about relevant items and not going off into some kind of a treasure or a fishing expedition for if the person ever had mental health problems.
Well,
we
thank
want
you.
to encourage mental health professionals being sought for their help.
100%. So our time has come to a close. It's a very quick goodbye, but we genuinely appreciate your sharing your morning with us. And given the 50th anniversary, any last minute messaging for the workforce, for the future leaders of the intelligence community that you want to share?
No, just that I appreciate the time here. Thank you. And I will say this from a U.S. government, from a taxpayer's perspective, the decision that I was not involved in, that others made to form this agency and bring it together and collect together a lot of the security disciplines that are the front lines of our security enterprise, that was a good decision. And it has been a success. The missions are all stronger because of what was done by Congress and the executive branch to create this agency. And yes, we all, me included, owe a debt of gratitude to the workers at DCSA that are out there with national security on their mind every single day of the week. And even when they haven't quite figured out all the best ways to reduce the timeliness for an FCL or something like that, they are focused on our national security relentlessly and trying to improve it every day. So I want to thank them, but thanks to the people who put this agency together. It was a good idea. Thanks.
I agree, and that is the feedback I hear across the community, so well done. And again, this webinar will be available for viewing by the end of the week, so maybe some folks who were working too hard this morning didn't have time to view it from your team can hear your accolades at a later date. So thanks again, Bill. I just have a couple of closing remarks. I'm getting slacks that I've gone over time, sorry, but I did want to mention with all the students we have that are tuning in today, we open our scholarship application timeline this week. We kick it off and you've got about 2.5 months to complete those applications. This year, INSA is awarding 7 scholarships to undergrads as well as grad students, master's students pursuing careers in the intelligence community. And then Thursday evening, speaking of the future of the IC workforce, we will be hosting our annual Achievement Awards in Arlington, Virginia. I believe there are probably about 10 seats left if you want to register. This is where we give out 6 awards to future leaders of the intelligence community. And then you can check out our website. We've got a couple more webinars coming up, several in-person events. But again, really appreciate those who tuned in. I apologize to those whose questions I didn't get to today, but really, really do appreciate your engagement and have a great Valentine's Day. Thanks so much.